As I've sat in my office over the last whole 2 days, yeah, it's been great. I've been looking at my empty bookshelves and the blank walls, and I found myself thinking, how on earth did I get here? A little over a year ago, before I was starting my final year of rabbinical school, I recall feeling terrified just imagining this exact moment where we are right now, picturing what awaited me on the other side of the tunnel known as rabbinical school. So as I stand here before you, again, I ask, how did I get here? I imagine Bilam, the protagonist of our Torah portion this week, might have been wondering the same thing. His journey, which we'll talk a little bit about, it began with the intention of cursing a people and ended with the singing of their praises. I would imagine he might wonder, how did I get here? The scene opens with Balak, a Moabite king for whom the portion is named, and he's terrified of the enormous Israelite nation that is encamped on the outskirts of his kingdom. In an attempt to protect his land, he hires Bilam, a non-Israelite prophet who has received the ability from God to administer blessings and curses. Must be nice. Just saying. Balak hopes that Bilam will be able to use his powers to curse the Israelites and save the Moabite kingdom. Bilam accepts the generous employment offer from King Balak, and so he goes to bed. And the next day, Bilam saddles up his donkey and sets off to the overlook above the Israelite camp. Along their way, God places a divine messenger holding a sword, not so friendly, before them. Inexplicably, Bilam is not able to see this messenger that's right in front of them. However, his donkey is. Understandably, the animal turns from the path to avoid the evident danger, and Bilam, not seeing this being himself, assumes his donkey has lost her marbles, and he whips her to get her right back on the path. 2 more times we watch this scene repeat itself as Bilam's level of patience with his mode of transportation dissipates. And at this moment, we hear the donkey speak. What have I done to you that you've beaten me 3 times? A fair question. Bilam responds angrily, apparently not taken off guard by his suddenly talking donkey. But his donkey continues. Aren't I the donkey that you've been riding all along until right now? Have I ever done this to you before? The answer was no. No, she had never done that to him before. So now Bilam's anger turned to regret and embarrassment. It's at this moment that the text tells us that God uncovers Bilam's eyes. He sees for the first time what his donkey had been protecting him from. The divine messenger standing in the way, his drawn sword in his hand. And after seeing it, Bilam bows right down to the ground. The messenger instructs Bilam to go do as Balak has said, go curse the Israelites. However, he can only say exactly what it is that God tells him to say. Bilam agrees. 3 times King Balak takes Bilam to the overlooking the Israelite camp to curse them, and 3 times words of blessing pour out of Bilam's mouth. Might he wonder, how did I get here? I can't say a talking donkey or a divine messenger with a sword led me to find my way here to Temple Israel. So how did I get here? Aboard a 15-passenger van, as often happens, from the Milwaukee airport to Oconomowoc, Wisconsin for a Jewish music conference, I met a young, enthusiastic rabbi who had been in the field over 5 years. We spoke about HUC, about professors, about our experiences, about the year in Israel. And then I blurted out, maybe a little dramatically, as I might tend to do, the real question I wanted answered, which was, is everything going to be okay after I'm ordained? Like, is there life after school? She smiled and said, yes, it's going to be okay after school. Then she went on to tell me how much she loved her job, even though she didn't even want to call it that. She couldn't have fathomed how wonderful life in the field would be. She raved about her community and about the people she had the opportunity to work with every day. She spoke about loving what she did with such passion that she actually gave me hope for the future. As you may have guessed, I serendipitously ended up on a van to this conference with Rabbi Bowman, as well as Kara Greenstein and Alex Evans. I honestly don't think we saw each other again during the whole entire conference. Is that fair to say? I don't think we spoke ever again, but I remember that van ride of this warm, wonderful rabbi telling me that it was going to be okay after school was over. Moving back to the end of last summer, I had a job offer on the table that would enable me to circumvent the entire rabbinic placement process. Intellectually, it felt right. Who wants to go through these hoops that you have to jump through to get a job with all these interviews? It's like speed dating, and then it's really like The Bachelor, because then you go meet the parents when you go to your site visits. So to avoid that, it felt like a good idea. My mentors and colleagues were advising me that it would be a mistake not to take it, and that sounded reasonable to me. However, the more we progressed in our discussions about the position, the more and more my gut tried to tell me that it wasn't the right place for me to be. I literally felt sick to my stomach and didn't know how to walk away from what made so much sense on paper. Luckily, I did. And so I entered the rabbinic placement process months after my classmates. And again, I found myself terrified by what seemed like a risky choice to make, to walk away from a sure thing, to throw my hat into the unpredictable ring of finding a rabbinic job. When I was perusing the list of congregations I could apply to, it's like a checklist. You just, decide where you want to send your application, and off it goes. I saw Temple Israel in Memphis posted an assistant rabbi education. Now, I didn't remember the name of this congregation. I just remembered it was in Memphis. So I decided I would use my Googling skills to find out if this happened to be the congregation where that nice rabbi that I met on that van on the way to that conference worked at. And indeed it was. When I walked into my interview, Rabbi Bowman looked at me in confusion and said the comforting words everyone wants to hear when they walk into an interview. "It's you?" From the moment I met Rabbi Greenstein and Rabbi Bowman and Elkenscheit during the first round of interviews, I was adamant that this was the place I needed to be. I was texting my friends, I was calling my mentors, saying, "What do you know about this place? Tell me about Memphis." And I literally would say, I never thought I would say this, but I think I'm in love with Memphis. So I was very adamant that this is where I needed to be. It wasn't because I knew anyone here, because I didn't, but thank you for hiring the Strausses, because I did happen to know them from before, which we can talk about later. But so thank you for hiring them, so I would at least have two people that I previously knew when I got here. It wasn't because of its location, it wasn't because of its size or great reputation, although it has both, but because after meeting these people, something in me said, this is where I need to be. It was as if the universe was yelling at me, "You belong at Temple Israel." My dear teacher, Rabbi Richard Levy, always told us that God was part of the placement process. You can imagine as students looking for a job, we really connected with that statement. He just said we might not understand exactly how until it's over. Perhaps, much like Bilam, I too was being guided by messengers that I did not realize were there. Bilam's encounter with the divine messenger altered his course from one of cursing to one of blessing. And meeting Rabbi Bowman, my much less terrifying messenger than the one that approached Bilam, she didn't have a sword, so that was helpful. She also altered my course to one of tremendous blessing. Thinking back to the episode in our Torah portion, Rabbi Andy Shapiro-Katz offers a modern midrash that suggests that Bilam and his donkey represent two parts of the whole of Bilam, instead of being actual separate blessings. Bilam represents the intellect, that which we can rationalize, while Bilam's donkey represents the gut, your kishkas, your intuition. He asks, how often do we follow our intellect when our gut is telling us to change direction? How often do we convince ourselves that we are on the right path, that we are doing something that is the right thing when in fact it's not, but we're not able to see it? The only thing that is communicating with us, telling us that what we're doing is wrong, is our gut. The question is, how far do each of us have to go before we listen to that part of our character, our gut? Sometimes we need that kick in the kishkas. The third and most famous of Bilam's blessings includes the words, Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. How lovely are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling place is Israel. As I begin my time here at Temple Israel, I'd like to offer the following blessing. Ma tovu ohalecha Memphis, mishkenotecha Yisrael. How beautiful is Memphis, and this place, Temple Israel. How rich is our history, how wonderful are the people that comprise this sacred community. God, uncover our eyes as you did for Bilam, so that we might recognize the messengers among us and give us the strength to change course when needed. Shabbat Shalom.